Hi, everybody. We are back, and I want to welcome you for the ceremonial 100th module cut. So we'll go ahead and do that together. But just to recap where I am in the process, I have completed building my 100 modules, or will momentarily. And then the next step will be to take the 100 modules and assemble them through a clustering process to create our 3D sculpture. Okay, so I'll now switch over so that we can do that. All right, so as you can see here, have the modules. And this last one here, right at the bottom of our screen, is going to be the 100th piece. So as I said before, I'm just making a simple triangular form. Looks something like this. It's kind of a pyramidal shape. And so I used about 2 pieces of Bristol board in order to produce all of these. And just kind of marked where I'm going to be making my cuts. So as you can see here, there's a light pencil mark on there that I'm going to score. And when I score that, I'm not going to cut all the way through it. I'm just going to lightly cut it to the point where I can now easily bend it along that score, as you can see there, right? And so now, that was the thing I mentioned before that, again, saves the amount of cuts I'm doing, saves the gluing, maybe makes the assembly process a little bit easier, a little quicker. Using my old-fashioned Elmer's here to now glue these 2 pieces together. I've already pre-cut this other triangle. And it depends what type of glue you have, but it has taken about 10 seconds or so. I think I put a little too much glue on this one, so I might hold it for a little bit longer. But you want to try to use as little glue as possible in order for it to stick. Again, like I was saying, it was normally taking about 10 seconds for mine, just kind of holding it in place until it's relatively firm and is able to hold itself. Like I said, I'm going to hold this one a little bit longer just because if you have more glue, then there's more surface that needs to dry in order for this thing to be secure. All right, so that probably should be good. And as I've been going through, holding it until a certain point where it looks like it can dry on its own, and I've proceeded on to the next one. Right, and so this is what I meant by creating an assembly line type process. Cut it, score it, glue it onto the next one, and we have our 100 pieces. So next, I'm going to walk through how we can aggregate this into what I'm going to be doing, which is more of a tree canopy structure that would be, in theory, a shading structure, probably in a park somewhere. At least that's where I'm imagining my site to be in my head. So we'll go ahead to that next step. All right, so next step here, I decided I want to have a base that I can start with. So I took another sheet of Bristol board to serve as my base. I started with one of my modules in the corner, just kind of traced it, and then just projected those lines out so that I have a grid. This, again, is not something that you have to do. It was just something that, for me, I was thinking and wanted it to relate to some type of grid. I just did a quick conceptual sketch. The first one was something like this, where we were looking at this, each of these representing like a tree trunk, and then this being like a tree canopy up above. And then maybe, again, if we're looking at this and this is a base, this whole thing ends up being a grid. Maybe these being like these vertical tree trunks that can even be seats, or again, like this ends up being maybe a place for shelter or something you kind of walk through and experience as this three-dimensional sculpture. All right, so that's how I got to here, and tracing out this. And then now I can kind of look at this and almost look at this as puzzle pieces. And this kind of helps me when I'm trying to, sometimes giving yourself some order is helpful. Sometimes it's also, can be a hindrance if it's giving you too many limitations. But, for example, just throwing these on here and looking at that, there's something that kind of feels nice about that placement. And maybe that's where I start with my three trunks and start building from there. And one thing I'll kind of keep the video rolling here, just so you can see the progression of it as it goes. But I just want to remind everybody, as you're starting to build this, you have your modules. Part of the intention of this assignment is to have a level of order. So when it comes to these modules, something that's repetitive. So something repetitive that can, hopefully simplify some things that you're trying to do. And then, the next part about it is being spontaneous, right? So don't be afraid to, can't always plan everything out. And a lot of this process is experimental. So think about this as having a certain degree of spontaneity, and try to channel your creativity and what your greater, intention is for this project, what your narrative is, and channel that while you are, just again, experimenting, exploring some of these modules and how you put them together. You can put them together, just by holding them in place, get an idea of what it looks like, eventually glue them in place, even just tape them, in place to, again, just start to look at it and say, what does that look like? Do I like that? I'm going to take this other one here, and then you can start to, and whatever your modules are, you can just start to experiment and build up from there. So again, keep that in mind. This is an assignment that certainly needs a degree of patience, right? So be patient, be precise, but also try to be as creative as possible. And keep in mind that instead of painting, right, these are our tools, right? So this is our medium. Paper is our medium. This is our way of, now we have to take this medium and use it as expression. So keep that in mind. And remember not to make it too flat, right? The last assignment was actually intended to be introductory, and it was more flat, taking something flat and then transitioning it to being more three-dimensional. Try to make this thing as, again, three-dimensional as possible, going vertically, going horizontally, but not just flat. All right, so we'll start.